Logan Pierce had spent years chasing criminals, breaking down doors, and putting dangerous people behind bars, but nothing could have prepared him for the battle that was about to unfold in his own front yard. The neighborhood seemed perfect when he first moved in. Manicured lawns, white picket fences, and friendly smiles from neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs. After years of high-risk assignments as a U.S. Marshal, Logan was looking forward to some well-earned peace, a place where he didn't have to watch his back every second. At first, everything seemed normal. His neighbors were polite, and the quiet streets felt like the safe haven he'd been craving. But then, the letters started arriving. First, it was a warning about his trash cans being visible from the street, then a complaint about the color of his shutters being non-compliant with the neighborhood's aesthetic. Logan brushed them off, thinking it was just overzealous rule enforcement. But soon, the nitpicking turned into something more aggressive. A fine for a barely overgrown patch of grass, a notice about his truck being too large for the driveway, a demand to repaint his mailbox, despite it being the exact shade as his neighbor's. The messages came signed by the Homeowners Association, HOA, a name he barely paid attention to when buying the house. Now, it seemed like they were watching his every move. Logan had dealt with criminals, but these people weren't pointing guns or breaking the law. They were hiding behind paperwork and technicalities. Something felt off, but he didn't realize just how deep the rabbit hole went until it was too late. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. The first fine arrived in a neatly folded envelope, tucked into his mailbox like an innocent piece of mail. Logan Pierce ripped it open, without a second thought, until he saw the bolded words staring back at him. Notice of violation. Immediate payment required. The reason? His grass was exactly 2 inches taller than HOA regulations allowed. Logan let out a dry chuckle. 2 inches. He had spent his career hunting fugitives and protecting high-profile witnesses, and now he was being fined over grass. He crumpled the paper and tossed it onto the kitchen counter. A minor annoyance, nothing more. But the next one came just a few days later. Another fine, this time for his mailbox. Apparently, the color was a shade too dark compared to the approved palette. He checked his neighbor's mailbox, identical to his own. No fine. By the third notice, Logan was no longer amused. This time, it was a $500 penalty for parking his truck in his own driveway. The claim? It was too large and didn't align with the community's aesthetic. That was the moment he knew. This wasn't just rule enforcement. This was targeted. Logan stormed into the HOA office, a small, glass-walled building near the entrance of the neighborhood. Inside, a woman with a stiff smile and lifeless eyes greeted him. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" she asked, barely looking up. "I don't need one," Logan said, slapping the stack of fines onto the counter. "I want to know why I'm getting hit with these ridiculous violations." Before she could answer, a deep voice cut through the room. "Mr. Logan," said Richard Vaughn, the HOA president, stepping out from his office. He was a tall man with an air of arrogance, his suit pressed to perfection. "We don't tolerate non-compliance in our community." Logan narrowed his eyes. "Non-compliance? My truck is parked in my driveway. My mailbox is the same color as half the houses on the block." Vaughn's smile was thin, calculated. "Rules are rules, Mr. Logan. If you don't like them, you're free to move." Logan felt a familiar fire rising in his chest. He had faced threats before, real ones. But this was something different. A game of power. A slow, calculated attack. "You're not getting a cent out of me," Logan said, his voice calm but firm. "I know my rights." Vaughn's smile didn't waver. "Then I hope you enjoy legal battles because we'll take this all the way." And they did. A lien was placed on Logan's house within weeks, claiming he owed thousands in unpaid fines. The HOA wasn't just trying to punish him. They were trying to own him, but they had picked the wrong man to push around. Logan wasn't just a homeowner. He was a U.S. Marshal. And if there was one thing he knew how to do, it was fight back. Logan. Pierce had been in high-stakes situations before. He'd chased down cartel leaders, stood face-to-face with armed fugitives, and kicked in doors with nothing but a badge and a gut feeling. But this was something different. This wasn't a firefight. It was a chess match. And the HOA was making its next move. The latest notice arrived with an eerie sense of finality. Severe violations, immediate corrective action required. Attached was a list of fabricated infractions, unauthorized exterior modifications, unapproved landscaping changes, neglect of property resulting in community depreciation. It was all lies. Logan had changed nothing since moving in. His home was spotless, his lawn trimmed, and his driveway no different than the others. Yet here it was, official paperwork claiming otherwise. That's when it hit him. This wasn't just about him. It was bigger. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were manufacturing violations. Logan had spent his life reading people, sniffing out deception, spotting the tells that gave criminals away. And Richard Vaughn? He reeked of corruption. The way he delivered threats with a polite smile. The way the HOA's fines always seemed to benefit someone other than the community. Something was off. So Logan did what he did best. He investigated. It started with public records, old HOA meeting notes, property transactions, legal disputes. At first it seemed like standard bureaucracy. But then he noticed a pattern. Dozens of homeowners fined into foreclosure. Homes bought by shell companies, then sold at a profit, often to people with direct ties to the HOA board. It was a scam, a highly organized operation. Logan's fingers tightened around his coffee mug as he stared at his laptop screen. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, they were running a real estate racket. Digging deeper, Logan found internal memos hinting at backdoor deals. One document, marked confidential, detailed the forced sale of a home that had belonged to a veteran who, just months earlier, had been slapped with thousands in HOA fines. Logan clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about money. This was predatory. Someone was targeting homeowners, people who didn't back down, people who refused to comply, people like Logan. That night, as he sat in the dim glow of his computer screen, a realization settled in. They weren't just trying to fine him. They were trying to take his home, and if they thought he was going to roll over and let it happen, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Logan Pierce had dealt with criminals who ran drug empires, arms dealers who funded wars, and fugitives who would rather shoot their way out than surrender. But Richard Vaughn? He was something different. He didn't need a gun to ruin lives. He had a pen, a contract, and a corrupt system that let him get away with it. Logan sat in his home office. Documents spread across the desk. Red markings connected names, addresses, and sale records like a crime board in a homicide investigation. The pattern was undeniable. Dozens of foreclosures. Each one started the same way. Small fines, escalating penalties, and eventually a forced sale. And who ended up with the properties? Vaughn. Not directly, of course. He was too smart for that. The purchases were made through a network of shell companies, each linked to people with close ties to the HOA board. They were running a scheme, one that had stolen homes from hardworking families, the elderly, and even veterans. The method was always the same. Target a homeowner who couldn't or wouldn't fight back. Hit them with fines until they broke. Threaten legal action. Slap a lien on the house. Force them to sell cheap or lose everything. Flip the property for profit. Logan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't just about power. This was about money. A lot of it. And now? He was next. Logan wasn't just fighting harassment anymore. He was in the middle of a high-stakes con. Vaughn had underestimated him, thinking he was just another homeowner who would fold under pressure. But Logan wasn't like the others. He wasn't a retiree struggling to understand legal jargon. He wasn't a single mother overwhelmed by endless fees. He was a U.S. Marshal, trained to take down criminals who thought they were untouchable. And he had just enough evidence to start taking Vaughn's operation apart. But first, he needed proof. Real proof. Something that would hold up in court. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Hey, Mike," he said as the call connected. I need a favor. Mike Connolly, an old friend from the Justice Department. If anyone could help him track down the financial connections and legal loopholes Vaughn was exploiting, it was him. There was a pause on the line. Then, "You in trouble, Logan?" Logan glanced at the pile of HOA notices, the fraudulent violations, the threats. "Not yet," he said, "but I'm about to cause some." The next morning, Logan took a slow walk around his neighborhood, watching, observing. He knew Vaughn was watching him too. Sure enough, a sleek black car idled near the HOA office. A man in a suit stood beside it, phone in hand, occasionally glancing in Logan's direction. They were getting nervous. Logan smirked to himself. Good. Let them wonder what he knew. Let them worry. Because now? It was his move, and he wasn't just going to fight back. He was going to take them down. Logan Pierce had been in plenty of fights before. He'd faced down cartel enforcers, cornered fugitives who swore they'd never be taken alive, and walked out of shootouts that should have killed him. But this was the dirtiest fight he'd ever been in, because his enemy wasn't holding a gun. They were holding a judge's signature. The envelope sat on his kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb. It was thicker than the others, more official-looking. He knew before he even opened it. This wasn't just another fine. Logan tore it open and scanned the words inside. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. His jaw tightened. The HOA had escalated to their final play. They weren't just trying to fine him into submission. They were trying to take his home. The reason? A long list of fabricated violations, all meticulously compiled into a legal document full of lies. Overgrown lawn, structural violations, failure to comply with HOA regulations. The same nonsense. They'd used to push other homeowners out, but this time they had a court ruling to back it up. That's when Logan saw the signature. Judge Elliot Grayson, a name that set off alarms in his head. He knew that name. A little too well. Logan didn't believe in coincidences. He'd spent years watching corrupt officials manipulate the law for personal gain, and when he dug into Judge Grayson's history, what he found made his blood boil. Grayson had a history of ruling in favor of Vaughn's HOA, dozens of cases, suspiciously swift decisions, every single one siding against homeowners. This wasn't just biased enforcement, it was legalized theft. Logan clenched his fists. They thought they had won, that he would pack up, cut his losses, and leave like the others. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, Logan put on his best suit, the one he usually reserved for court testimonies and high-profile arrests. If Vaughn and his people wanted a fight, they were about to get one. First stop, the courthouse. Logan didn't just show up alone. He brought evidence, financial records, meeting notes, screenshots of Vaughn's shell companies, and most importantly, proof that the HOA's violations were fabricated. He walked straight into the clerk's office and filed a motion to overturn the foreclosure. The clerk barely glanced up. "That judge's ruling is final, sir." Logan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Final?" His eyes locked onto hers. "Nothing's final when fraud is involved." A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. He could see it. She knew something was off. He left the courthouse, knowing one thing. This wasn't just a fight for his house anymore. This was a war against a corrupt system. And Logan Pierce had never lost a war. Logan Pierce had spent his career hunting down criminals who thought they were untouchable. They all made the same mistake. They believed the system would protect them, that their power or connections would keep them safe. Richard Vaughn and his HOA empire were no different. They had been playing a rigged game for years, but now, Logan was about to flip the board. Logan knew that criminals, whether they wore suits or ski masks, always left trails. Paper trails, digital footprints, mistakes. So, he dug deeper. Using public records, he traced Vaughn's shell companies back to a network of fraudulent property transfers. Homes were being foreclosed at lightning speed, then quietly resold to entities with ties to the HOA board. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Logan also discovered something even more damning. HOA meeting transcripts. They weren't public, but a few residents had secretly recorded them. One particular conversation stood out. We just need him out of the picture. Once he's gone, we'll take care of the rest." Logan replayed the audio, jaw tightening. They weren't just trying to take his home. They were planning something bigger. So he did what any good marshal would do. He set a trap. Logan started pushing back, publicly. He filed official complaints. He called in favors with law enforcement contacts to scrutinize Vaughn's financials. He made noise in the neighborhood, letting homeowners know they weren't alone. And just like that, they took the bait. It was late, past midnight, when the knock came. 3 short raps on the door. Too deliberate to be a neighbor. Logan stepped to the side before opening it. Old habits. A man stood on his porch, dressed in a dark suit, calm but calculated. "You've made a lot of enemies," the man said smoothly. No introduction, no pretense, just a warning disguised as conversation. Logan crossed his arms. "That's supposed to scare me?" The man smiled. "It's supposed to be a courtesy. Walk away from this, or you won't like what happens next." For a long moment, Logan said nothing. He had seen this before, a last-ditch attempt to intimidate someone who wasn't backing down. Finally, he smirked. "You just made a mistake." The man's expression flickered. "Oh?" Logan turned his phone around. The screen was still recording. "You threatened a federal officer on his own property." The man's face drained of color. Logan stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Tell Vaughn he's out of time." The next morning, Logan walked into the HOA courthouse, not as a victim, but as a man who had already won. With recorded threats, fraudulent documents, and a financial paper trail leading straight to Vaughn, the case wasn't just about saving his house anymore, it was about taking them all down. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. The polished oak benches were lined with residents, homeowners who had lived in fear of the HOA for years. Today they weren't just spectators. They were witnesses to the reckoning. At the front of the room, Logan Pierce stood tall, his face unreadable. He wasn't here as a victim. He was here as an executioner. On the other side of the courtroom sat Richard Vaughn, the HOA president who had spent years bending the law to his will. Today, however, there was no smug arrogance in his expression, no cocky smirk, just sweat, because for the first time, Vaughn wasn't in control. Logan had spent weeks building his case. He had dug deep, pulling every thread Vaughn and his corrupt board had tried to keep buried. And now? The noose was tightening. As the prosecutor laid out the evidence, the courtroom fell silent. Fabricated violations issued to push homeowners into foreclosure. Falsified court documents used to justify illegal property seizures. Embezzled. HOA funds funneled into shell companies directly tied to Vaughn and his associates. Then came the recording. The one where Vaughn's enforcer had stood on Logan's porch and issued a threat. "You've made a lot of enemies. Walk away from this, or you won't like what happens next." The audio played over the courtroom speakers like a gunshot. Undeniable proof. Vaughn's attorney tried to object, but the judge shut him down. The damage was done. Logan sat still, watching Vaughn. The man was unraveling, his hands clenched into fists, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. But there was nowhere left to run. Then came the final blow. A former HOA treasurer stepped forward, someone Logan had quietly convinced to testify. With shaking hands, the man revealed how Vaughn had personally ordered him to manipulate HOA financial records. "He told me to keep it quiet. Said it was just business." The jury shifted in their seats. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Vaughn knew it was over. The judge's gavel came down with a decisive crack. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Logan Pierce." Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Some of the homeowners clapped. Others let out a breath they had been holding for years. But the best part? The criminal investigation that was now being launched. The foreclosures would be reversed. The stolen homes would be restored. And Vaughn? He was leaving the courthouse in handcuffs. As Logan stepped outside, the weight that had been pressing down on him finally lifted. A small crowd of homeowners gathered, shaking his hand, thanking him. For the first time in years, they weren't afraid. Logan glanced at the courthouse steps where Vaughn was being escorted into a police car. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Logan smirked. "Rules are rules, right?" he muttered under his breath. And just like that, justice was served. The neighborhood had been silent for years. A silence built on fear. Fear of fines, fear of retaliation, fear of losing everything to an HOA that ruled with an iron fist. But today was different. Today, that silence was broken by cheers. With Richard Vaughn behind bars and his closest board members facing criminal charges, the HOA's reign of terror was officially over. The fraudulent liens were overturned. Homeowners, who had been forced to sell at unfair prices, were given their properties back. And the HOA itself? Dismantled. Permanently. No more weaponized rules. No more manufactured violations. No more corrupt board members preying on their own neighbors. 4. The first time in years, the community belonged to the people who actually lived in it. Logan Pierce stood on his front porch, watching as workers removed the HOA's official sign from the entrance of the neighborhood. A few residents gathered nearby, some shaking his hand, others clapping him on the back. "You really did it," an older man said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You took them down." Logan offered a small smile. "They took themselves down. I just helped them trip over their own greed." He had fought a lot of battles in his life, but this one? It wasn't about arresting a fugitive or taking down a cartel. This was about justice, and he had delivered it the only way he knew how, with evidence, persistence, and a refusal to back down. As he turned to head inside, a local news reporter approached, microphone in hand. "Mr. Logan, any final words for the people watching?" At home? Logan glanced at the camera, then at the spot where Vaughn had once stood, believing himself untouchable. A smirk played at the corner of his lips. "Mess with the law," he said, "and the law will mess with you." And with that, Logan Pierce stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Justice had been served, and he was finally home. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.